Welcome to today's discussion. I am joined by Chris Ray. We'll do some introductions here in a minute, but today we're going to be talking about the reality check and role for AI in the PTaaS space, penetration tests and a service, and how this space is evolving and how AI is being integrated into this. But before we get into that, just some quick introductions. My name is Tim Nordvedt. I am the Senior Manager of Solutions Architects in North America here at Synack. Synack is a platform-based offensive security testing firm. We'll do anything from your short compliance tests up to continuous tests, and we're also starting to deploy some agentic AI options, so your one-stop shop for all offensive security needs. I've been with Synack for 4 years, and I live in the Maryland area. Chris, over to you.
Sure. Thanks, Tim. Obviously I'm Chris Ray. I've been a analyst and an author here at GigaOm since 2021. Prior to that, hands-on practitioner, implementer, all the things in a variety of businesses from 12-person teams up to some of the largest household names in finance that you'd ever hear. During that time, I've made some good decisions in purchasing, made some poor decisions in purchasing, but along the way, I like to think that I've learned a thing or two, and I try to distill down that wisdom, that hard-earned wins and losses, into the reports that I produce here. And just like everybody else, that's our aim here, is to create a good buyer's guide. In this case, we're here to talk today about the PTaaS space, which is one of my favorites. Just more recently, I've been a field CTO here overseeing the security and risk portfolio. So all things cybersecurity, all things risk, that boils up to me when we're talking about the analysis.
Great. Thanks for that, Chris. I'm looking forward to this conversation. And I do want to mention for those watching that we do have some slides, but this is not going to be a presentation where we have a bunch of PowerPoints and everything. Slides are really meant to just kind of guide us, keep us on track, because I think we could both agree when you start talking AI, we could go down a lot of rabbit holes. So it's more meant as a discussion, and we'll try to frame it around some of the slides we pull together. So, Chris, before we get into how AI integrates and applies to the world of PTaaS, I just want to take a step back and just talk about AI in general, because this is a conversation I have a lot. AI is a very broad term. In reality, most of us have been using AI for decades in more various forms. When AI kind of got its first start back in the 1950s in college laboratories, like there's a lot of variations of AI. So it's helpful when I talk to, some of my colleagues to understand when a vendor says they're using AI, like what does it actually mean? So there's obviously some nuance to this, but I always kind of break it down to three high-level buckets when I'm talking about AI. The first being the pattern matching and automation. This is what's been around for a while. It's often referred to as machine learning or deterministic logic. It's kind of the evolved if-then statements, where it's predefined flows. It's based off of known signatures, known patterns. Can't do any discovery. It has to be some technical fingerprints there to kind of built into it, but input A always leads to output B. Very efficient, very high speed, but it's kind of limited to a known set of data. The middle column, generative AI, this is what kind of caused the big AI boom and what most of us think of when we think of AI. It's the chat GPTs, it's the Claudes, it's the natural language interactions, great at taking complex data and creating simplified reports. It's great at, describing the how and the why, but it can't discover. Again, it's limited to the data set that it was trained on as far as the outputs go. Agentic AI is kind of the cutting edge of AI, where it's you take that next step and you actually give autonomy and authority to the AI agent, where it can actually plan and execute specific missions within defined parameters. It can, observe, it can learn, it can pivot, it can change strategies over time. It can actually has the ability to create new data based off of, the parameters and guardrails that you've put onto it. So I guess my question to you, Chris, is do you look at this any differently? And like when you're out there kind of doing your analysis of different vendors and talking to customers and such, do you see kind of this AI confusion coming up a lot?
But yeah, across the board, not just PTaaS, not just security, but even commercial consumer AI, as everyone who has interacted with it thinks of, it's a chatbot. It's a question and answer. It's Google Plus. It's how you find data on the internet today. And that's like a 1% dig into what it's actually, what's actually there. And I really like the way you bucket these together, because that's true. Um, pattern matching is really that's beyond table stakes. That's below table stakes at this point in time. That's Tenable, Nessus, OpenVAS 20 years ago. That's leave it to that. Um, and then, probably the other thing is with everyone kind of using the really vague term AI, you forget under the giant AI umbrella, there's 13, 14 distinct technologies: computer vision, machine learning, generative AI. I can't even remember all of them off the top of my head. So that's kind of like the first hit the brakes. Let's talk about this for a second. When you say AI, what are you actually doing? Like, are you scraping sites using computer vision? Are you interacting? Are you querying large data sets using an LLM to better understand what you're interacting with? Unfortunately, I think we're at the point now where generative AI is really just most of the time with 90% accuracy. It's great for summation. It's great for reporting. It's great for breaking down complex topics into maybe a few key points that are, more salient and easier consumed. And then you have that last bucket that you put together here, the agentic side. I think that's really where we want to be with a lot of the security technologies, not just PTaaS, but PTaaS specifically. I don't think we're there yet. I know we're not there yet. There's a lot of there is some hype from some vendors that are saying that they have full agentic capabilities. But if you ask some good questions, like you know, put a vendor on the spot and say, describe to me the difference between your AI and a really well put together Python script. If they have a difficult time relaying how it's different, that's a pretty good indication that maybe there's a lot of fluff involved here. So yeah, to answer your original question, I love how you broke this down. This rings true with my gut. It says, yeah, this is about right.
I love that last question, kind of what to ask of vendors to, when it's one thing to read their site and read the market material, but when you kind of get down to it, understanding what's under the hood, it's something we need to do our due diligence as we're out there looking. So to click one level deeper, you kind of touched on this is kind of LLMs is kind of where 90% of it is right now. And agentic AI, why there's a lot of vendors kind of working towards that space. Even Synack, we're working on our own agentic AI offering with Sarah, Synack Autonomous Red Agent. There's a difference between LLMs and agentic AI. And as you mentioned, agentic AI, and I think we'll touch on this in another slide, some of the limitations is it can't do nonlinear tasks. It's great at those linear tasks. It's great at scale. It's great at doing the same thing over and over. An agentic AI doesn't get, try to rush through a project at 4 p.m. on a Friday when a traditional consultant is trying to get off for the weekend. So agentic AI can provide those consistent results, but it's the nonlinear task where it's not there yet. Um, so I guess as the vendors we're looking at kind of going into this agentic AI space, I'm curious your thoughts, like as you're out there talking to security leaders, are they ready for agentic AI in the security testing realm, or is there still a trust gap that we on the vendor side that we need to overcome with them?
No, I think with PTaaS specifically, I think buyers are ready. They're open and willing to accept findings from a fully agentic system. It's not like a defensive system like a CNAP or your XDR where you have to trust it to take actions on your behalf to prevent something. There's not as much risk involved, right? With the PTaaS, not saying that there isn't risk in penetration testing. Of course, there's risk, but the type of risk is different because of that. It's viewed differently, and at this point, I think most buyers are assuming that AI has helped the pen testing or the PTaaS vendor arrive at their conclusions in some capacity already. So they're already kind of assuming like, hey, maybe you're not telling us this is what's happening, but I wouldn't be surprised if that's what's happening. You kind of touched on this. We need to stop calling LLMs AI pen testing. It's not. Summarizing a report isn't the same as finding a 0 day. Uh, I mentioned this a minute ago. Pattern matching is for scanners. A really good way to think about the evolution here, or what we're seeing is Gen AI is really good for reporting, and agentic AI is where the action happens. That's where you take the brain out of the jar and you connect it to for lack of a better term, a body that's able to actually do things in the world and execute on its thoughts. That's the bridge we're trying to cross right now. Haven't seen a really good implementation of it yet. Not to say you guys aren't working on something, but I think the reality and the expectation they're too far apart right now.
I definitely like your illustration there, kind of differentiating between LLMs and agentic AI. Just kind of, double click into it once more. And this is kind of Synack, how we are approaching this. I'm curious your thoughts here. As we kind of go into this agentic AI world, and I mentioned this a minute ago that, as we've been developing our solution, what we're finding is, like I said, AI is great at the linear task. The known vulnerabilities of standard config scaling across thousands of IPs, where it's the nonlinear that's where AI still has limitations. It's the ability to take, disparate vulnerabilities and tie them together into a single exploit, or the business logic flaws, or understanding the context of the application, why a certain role could escalate privileges, and knowing that context there. So we're looking at this, that as great as AI is, in different companies are approaching this differently, there's still a need for a human in the loop just for that validation at different steps in the process. So I'm curious, as you look at this, like, do you think, how do you see the current market? Do you think a lot of vendors are kind of taking this approach, and do you still see the need for the human in the agentic AI process?
Yeah, it's a technology that's maturing probably more rapidly than almost any technology before it. Um, so I say that so that you can don't quote me in 18 months from now when I'm wrong, but right now, and probably the next 6 to 12 months, um, that's really that's where we're at. Is you can't fully trust the output. I seen a report recently, and this is not the same technology. We're talking about Gen AI. We're not talking about agentic AI or action oriented AI, but Gen AI in lab conditions under ideal circumstances, it gets it wrong 10% of the time. It hallucinates 10% of the time. Top models under ideal conditions are hallucinating 10% of the results, 10% of their output. That's not a problem isolated to Gen AI. It's a problem that can be fixed, but today, right now, that's still a real problem. You can somewhat apply that to what we're talking about here, which is AI able to take actions, able to do testing, able to interact in some way using some medium or mechanism. It's still not to the point where we can just say, ship it, it's ready to go. You need human expertise overseeing it for right now.
Absolutely. Glad to hear we're aligned there. So now that we've kind of laid the groundwork for AI, let's kind of bring it back to kind of your area of expertise here. I know you've been looking at this space for a while. I'd like to maybe take a couple minutes and walk us through, see how, I'd like to hear how you've seen this space evolve from traditional point in time testing to where we are today with kind of the PTaaS market combined with AI, and just some of your observations as a security leader.
If we work left or right here, and then I'll kind of go down the matrix that we have in front of us. Traditional pen testing, 2 to 3 testers under ideal circumstances. Most engagements would be 2 to 3. Sometimes you end up with one, and more is not always great. Sometimes you end up with 5, and you have 2 days from this person, 2 days from that person. Then you have the problem of trying to like correlate all the data that they put together. Compare that to PTaaS. A good PTaaS vendor will be global. They'll have a large talent pool. They'll have mature processes that allow seamless handoff between not scopes in the PTaaS in the pen test engagement, but between individual tasks, so that there isn't that highly segmented view from 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 pen testers. Uh, Moving kind of now into the future view, yeah, a team of autonomous AI agents with some human oversight, I think that's probably the most likely middle ground that we'll be at in the next year to 2 years. If we wanna talk about 4, 5, 6 years, I believe that human oversight will probably be relegated to, um, high touch moments between buyers and the vendors. Those, after action reviews, the, report gathering phases where you're saying, "Let's have a Zoom call and let's go over what we found because we don't quite understand it." You're never gonna replace that. I mean, you could put some AI note taker in there. But I don't see it able to articulate the nuance of findings quite like a human ever can. So that's the who what. If we move into scale and speed, weeks long point in time, exactly right. Probably more like 2 to 3 months for most organizations that are just doing a single point in time one time a year compliance driven engagement. They do the testing. A month later, they get the findings, they get the formal report. Maybe they get some, highs or criticals ahead of time so they can fix them. That's not uncommon. But moving into PTaaS, this is really where it starts to shine. Is you're leveraging, like you say here, hundreds of researchers to cover a very broad attack surface, and it's almost in real time. You have a UI, you have a portal you can log into. You see what's happening day to day, hour to hour. You're able to action on things. You're able to communicate efficiently and effectively between the testing organization and the testing organization. That's, probably one of the highest friction points experiences that I had, which is we get a critical finding, we understand it from a technical standpoint, but we don't understand how they're able to achieve what they say they achieved. And so it turns into emails to the project manager on their side that they're disseminating information, non-technical people get involved, slows the whole process down. Looking ahead to the agentic AI future, like you guys say here, scale to test the entire attack surface and it's continuous. That's really what we're aiming for. I don't see that as a middle ground. I see that as a destination. That's where we want to be. How long it's gonna take us to get there? Tim, you probably have your finger on the pulse of that a little bit better than I do, but I don't see it happening in the next 12 months. I think it's gonna be dependent on that first line quite a bit. Talking about, the platform. With legacy pen testing, there really wasn't a platform. There was, processes, there's standard operating procedures, there's, project milestones. It was really treated like a project. Like, on day 1, we do this, on week 1, we do this. Weeks 2 through 4, we're gonna do the testing. Maybe we'll tell you about things we find. And this would vary a lot between pen testing organizations, between pen testing vendors. Moving to PTaaS, you'll find that things are much more structured, much faster. You have an actual platform to log into. You can see what's going on in real time. You can make adjustments in real time, like, oh, hey, we just launched this new part of our product. It wasn't in the original scope, but let's add it because it's important to us. We want to make sure it's secure. We want to make sure it's behaving the way we think it is. Let's go ahead and update our scope dynamically on the fly. You can do that with PTaaS. Looking ahead to the agentic future, if we want to call it that, same platform, same idea, same dynamic capabilities, but now it's gonna happen faster. Updating the scope, it's, right now, not that this is a bad thing, this is reality. Update a scope, and well, it's gotta make it to human testers. It's gotta make it into the scanning flow. It's gotta make it to all of the things. With agentic, that should happen at just about machine speed. Um, then looking at the limitations here, spot on, infrequent and narrow. That's probably the biggest holdback with legacy pen testing. Once a year engagement, maybe twice a year if you're really forward leaning. Um, but it's a lot of statically defined parameters of engagement, right? Here's our scope. Here's what you can do. Here's what you can't do. Updating that takes an email or a phone call to a project manager, and then the dissemination of information from there. Comparing that to PTaaS right now, you're more or less your only thing that's slowing you down is either making mistakes and saying, "Hey, let's add this, let's add that, let's expand the scope way too much for our purposes because now you can so easily," or it's just I don't want to say negligence because I think everyone's a little ignorant or negligent in some regard with their attack surface. Just not realizing what you need out there, because that's an area where PTaaS definitely excels compared to legacy pen testing. Some PTaaS solutions they will discover your public facing attack surface for you, and they'll say, "Do you want this in in your scope? Were you aware that this even exists?" Whereas legacy pen testing, you're bringing the subnets, you're bringing the DNS, you're bringing the domain names. Moving into the agentic future, I think you guys are on the right path here. Careful design of guardrails because things can go wrong fast at machine speed. There will still be the need for the human in the loop, human intervention, as you call it out here. And then the perennial favorite, the ethical and moral boundaries to safe operation of something that could bring down a website, bring down a service, that could accidentally, you know, um, divulge information. There's a whole rabbit hole there, and this is why agentic isn't forefront right now. This is why because we have to figure these problems out. When I say we, I mean the smart brains at vendors like Tim's with Synack and others. I'm leaving that problem to you guys. I'm just saying there's a problem and we need to figure it out.
I definitely agree with everything you said and just kind of double down. Yeah, this is what we're talking about in that third column there, this is kind of the goal where we want to be. And I agree with you. We're probably 12 months out or so before, as an industry, we're seeing a lot of people kind of hit all of these marks here and kind of delivering consistently. One thing I just want to kind of revisit is you talked about the platform. So we talked about the PTaaS market and delivering the platform. Do you see a platform approach to penetration testing? Do you see that as just kind of a different, delivery mechanism, or do you see that as kind of fundamentally changing the way people look at security testing and consume the output of that?
Yeah, so it's really important to define platform because there's multiple definitions. Some vendors are like, we're a platform, and some analyst firms are like, you're a feature, you're a platform. It's really wishy washy. So you have to first, you don't have to pick a definition of platform out there, but you have to decide for yourself, what does platform mean? And then apply that definition as you're looking out there. I like, when we're talking about what is a platform, it's a broad security portfolio. It's something that's not just one set of services, but it's something that has services that complement to each other, but you don't have to prescribe or subscribe to each of those services to get the benefit that you want. So, if I give an example in PTaaS, a platform would be one that is broad in the penetration testing capabilities, but also gives you the ability to maybe perform some type of internal analysis outside in. One that has an attack surface management capability that kind of funnels in features. And you can keep kind of adding pieces onto that. And how do those components of the solution work together? Well, they work together because it's a platform. So if we take that that's my definition, you guys can throw it out. You can use it and reuse it all you want. But if you take that, I'd say yes, choosing a platform is going to be more important. We're seeing that across the board. Look at cloud workload security, CSPM. Well, now it's basically CNAP. No one, I can't say no one. There's still buyers of just cloud workload, just CSPM. But for the most part, the platformization of that is what we're seeing. People are going into a CNAP and just not using the components that they don't use or don't need. Same thing's going to happen in PTaaS. Same thing's going to happen across the board in most other, not just security technologies, but technologies in general.
I love how you started off with the definition of platform. I speak at a number of security conferences, and usually one of my first slides, regardless of what I'm talking about, is a picture of the old "Who's on First" skit, where you have
Yeah, yeah,
these
yeah.
two comedians. They're using the same words with totally different meanings, and it's just comedic gold. But in the security space, it's really easy for us to throw out terms, but if we don't take the time to define what those terms mean to each other, we need to make sure we're aligned on the meaning of those terms, not just the terms themselves. So thank you for taking the time for that. And one of the things I
Absolutely.
really like as we look at this here is, you and I, we talked a few times before this, just kind of preparing for this. And you just mentioned how that PTaaS and just the testing space in general just has to evolve to remain effective because we live in just a DevOps driven world. And as
Oh,
fast
yeah.
as companies are pushing code, we have to be able to respond with security at the same speed of that. So taking the next step here, myself as a solutions architect, one of my jobs here at Synack is just to understand kind of what's in the space. I always like to know what are, other PTaaS vendors doing when they say they're doing AI, like what exactly are they doing? How are they deploying it? Um, and so I kind of pulled this together here is what I'm seeing as those in our space when they're saying they're AI, I'm seeing kind of four main focus areas where AI is being deployed. One is internal operations. I'm seeing AI being used as a launch support engine, using AI to help with the scoping process, initial recon, helping to remove some of those initial manual scoping process just to streamline that initial test setup and launch process. I've also seen AI being used as a power tool for the testers. Is that, building out an AI tool set that they can give to their testers that they can go out and be more effective with some of those kind of more repetitive tasks they see those researchers do. Let's build out an AI process to allow them to focus on the more complex stuff and kind of, automate some of the low hanging fruit. I've seen it on the customer side, AI as the triage engine, because there's when you're dealing with a PTaaS, you mentioned it earlier, is the results even with humans, or not even talking about AI slop, is the results are varied. Is so how can we utilize AI to filter through that noise, find the legitimate results? example of this is I read an article recently that Curl, the open source project, they just had to drop their bug bounty program back in January because they were being overwhelmed with AI slop, and they just did not have the bandwidth to triage everything. So I see this as a powerful area. And then lastly, for the developer, utilizing AI on the remediation side. I always tell my customers when I'm talking to them, it's one thing to find a vulnerability fast, but it's another thing to fix it fast. So how can we,
Yeah.
utilize AI to come in and, once we've identified an issue, fix it just as quickly? So I'm curious your perspective. If you see any other areas it's AI being used, and if so or if not, like which one of these areas do you see as like the biggest pain point where AI can come in and solve a problem quickly?
Yeah, so I have two thoughts kind of banging around in my head. I'm gonna try and put them together in a coherent way. The first one is AI isn't a single easy button. Like the commercials, if you're old enough. It's a series of engines, or really, we can call them agents. It's a series of processes for the different stakeholders in the entire pen testing process, right? Like you laid out, it's an engine for ops, power tools for testers, the triage engine for customers, the remediation guides for devs. That's important because spreading AI across the lifecycle ensures it's not a bottleneck in any one part of that process. If you have, like you pointed out with the curl example, if you're bombarded with, let's assume all of those findings were good, legitimate findings. They weren't, like you said, they were AI slop. But let's say they were all legitimate. If you go from processing 10 bug bounty, reports a week or a month. Now you're going to 1,000. You just don't have the capability of doing that. You need some sort of uh, easy button during that stage of the process, and that's really kind of what we're highlighting here. Is it can't just be AI on the front end or AI on the back end for summarization and reporting. You need to have it equally distributed to enhance all parts of that process. Now, to kind of answer your question, I'd say the triage engine, if we're going to call it that, this is the biggest pain point for my peers because you're paying for false positives. Unless you have really good triage and you understand and you can influence the process, um, automation's not always going to solve that. You need to have some rock solid method of triaging that will also keep up with the rest of the process.
So kind of just, taking a step further is the customer value, and you kind of already touched on some of these points, the what's in it for me is, I guess, we'll dig into the slide here in a minute. I love your thoughts. But I'm curious your one question, like as you're talking to your peers, as vendors like Synack and others in our space, we're moving to this agentic AI and we're introducing AI to different steps in the process. Are CISOs and other security leaders, are they seeing this as just a new cool toy that we're trying to push, or are they actually seeing real problems that AI can solve? Like, is there a necessary that we're being forced to evolve to AI? It's just not the next tech phase. If you get the question.
So yeah, it's interesting because it's not necessarily either of those or any of those. It's leadership recognizes there's a lot of value in AI, and there's an asterisk on that. Like, Bonds and his baseball home run record, there's an asterisk. There's a lot of value in it if it's done right, if it's applied correctly. And most leadership, even most implementers, they're not 100% set in what that means to do it right. Like it's evolving so fast and the capabilities are maturing so quickly that what was right 6 months ago isn't right today anymore, even 3 months ago. So that's probably the first major challenge is they know AI in whatever capacity will be a huge benefit to them, but they're uncomfortable with the idea because they don't know exactly how. And until they understand exactly how, it's really hard to write a check and spend money on it.
One question for you is, and again, kind of as you talk to your peers and such, like as they look at AI, is there a specific metric or is there a specific? I know you said there's kind of various paths there, but like, are they trying to look at AI for faster time to value? Are they trying to reduce MTTR and kind of reduce that time frame that a vulnerability exists? Like, is there one common metric you're hearing that security leaders are looking to address with AI?
Yeah, they're using, for the most part, when I talk to somebody, they're taking what they have now, like MTTR. the discovery efficacy, the ratio of true positives to false positives. Um, they're taking that and just saying, well, we'll just add AI into this and we'll keep measuring the same way. And that will work initially. I think that'll probably work for a while, but we really need to find new metrics that are, boy, buzzword, AI aligned to to help it make sense, because we're using a yardstick when we're now traveling miles per second instead of feet per second. That yardstick isn't going to be the best way to measure anymore.
Well, we're coming to the end of this discussion here. I want to give you some time to discuss this. A lot of this discussion came off of a report that you kind of developed as you analyzed a lot of the vendors in this space, and we'll link to that report and provide a link here at the end of this discussion. But can you take a couple minutes, just tell us some of your high level takeaways about the report and what readers can expect as they kind of dig into it?
Yeah, so let me just introduce the radar real quick. I won't spend too much time on it. As you probably know, we've been building the radar and PTaaS. I think this is our fourth year now. It kind of blew up a couple years ago, and nobody was covering it. I said, "Hey, let's. This seems obvious, guys. Let's do this." So when we build a report, we first define table stakes. These are the technology capabilities that you must have in order to be considered PTaaS. We do this for all the reports. It just draws a logical circle around all the technologies claiming to be PTaaS, so that when we do the evaluation, when we chart them out on the graphic that you see here, the reader of this report can know that, hey, on a base level, on a fundamental level, these are all similarly capable and will deliver similar results. But then we take that out because that's not very useful on its own. We identify five, six, seven, eight differentiating features. And then we score those differentiating features, and that largely impacts the distance to center that you see here. So, capabilities, sorry, vendors that score better, they have better capabilities, better differentiating feature sets, generally are going to be closer to center. That's only a part of the story, though. As you can see here, it's a 360-degree graphic. Take that very famous graphic that everyone probably has seen at some point in their mind. I won't mention it by name, where up and to the right is where you want to be. Completely throw that away. Down and to the left, up and to the left, down and to the right. Those can all be fantastic places to find a solution that makes sense for your organization. And that's a lot of the nuance in the radar. So on the top, we have mature vendors. On the bottom, we have innovation. And all we're comparing there is we're looking at the rate of change the vendor puts into the technology. A mature vendor, for the most part, will look and feel very much the same on day one as it does on day 900 of your contract. You won't expect revolutionary changes there. But if they're doing what you want and they're growing in the direction that serves your business, they can be a good solution. However, on the bottom of that is an innovative vendor. Innovative vendors will largely look and feel different. Their capabilities may change drastically. The UI may be overhauled in 12 months, but you're okay with that because they are changing how they function in a way that benefits you tremendously. You're gonna accept that uncomfortable change that humans don't like, and the reward there is you're gonna have capabilities that you may not get out of a mature vendor. They'll adopt them, but not as fast as an innovative vendor. And then left to right, we have features and platforms. And really, the best way that we define this in the reports is a feature on the left will address fewer use cases, fewer problem sets than than a platform on the right side of the radar. So when you're reviewing the radar, you have features and platforms on the left and the right, maturity versus innovation, top to bottom. What you're trying to do is look at it and say, okay, these are the three vendors that I need to talk to. The rest of these don't really fit my needs, but these are the three that make sense for me.
As we wrap this up, we kind of started off saying this that, this AI security roadmap, no one's developed the complete solution yet. We're all still in this building phase, kind of working towards where we want to be. Um, and so this is, just a couple things I wanted to throw out there as those watching this, hearing this, just kind of keep in mind, keep on their radar as they're looking for that autonomous, AI solution. Like three things that I don't know of any vendor that's, hit all three of these, marks yet, but something I think should be important on the roadmap. But one is the autonomous triage. We already touched on this, the ability for, AI to move from potential findings to verified findings. the ability to kind of reduce the noise and tell you where to focus. Of these 1,000 submissions, where do I really need to focus my attention? So I think that's one major area that AI will play a role. And we kind of talked about this before, the codified security. It's the death of a PDF. If that's all a test inventor is giving you as an output, I think we need to move on from that. It's kind of what we talked about is security needs to move at the same speed as you're deploying code. And it needs to live in the same place as of that code. And then lastly, the hybrid scaling, the unified force, where it's not fully autonomous. There needs to be some level of human interaction there. And it's, how can we manage, the human versus the machine, get the machine speed, but still have the value and creativity of human. So, Chris, as we're wrapping up here, I'm curious your thoughts as you're looking at where this space is going. If there's any other areas that you would throw out there for people to kind of keep their radar on and keep tracking.
I think the spaces you've covered are salient. They're accurate. They're what you need to have top of mind. I'll leave you with this. If your plans in 2026 still involves reading a PDF from your pen testing, your PTaaS solution, you're already behind the eight ball. You're losing. You really need demand autonomous triage, like we talked about. The triage engine is a critical component. Prioritize API first, like you talked about, getting those findings into your DevOps pipeline or lifecycle, and then look for hybrid scaling. Look for the opportunity to grow this beyond what you think it is today and to what it needs to be in the future. Um, Speaking of the future is a high signal, zero false positive data delivery future. That's taking what is found in the PTaaS solution and putting it directly into your developer workflows. That's ideal. And it's continuous, and that's really where we want to be. Um, Pen testing is great, but it's point in time. We really need that continuous aspect to ensure complete coverage. And then, if I was going to leave you with one thing, the people watching, and they could hold on to this one thing, I'd say stop paying for false positives. The economic incentive for vendors is powerful. That's the most effective way to force a vendor to prove that their AI is actually effective.
That is a great way to wrap it up, Chris. I couldn't have said it better myself. Stop paying for false positives, and I love what you painted of the future there. And I definitely look forward to Synack being one of the vendors kind of in that future. Just want to thank everyone who tuned in and listened today. As a reminder, Chris's full report, the radar for PTaaS, is available to download on synack.com. Chris, definitely enjoyed the conversation today, and thanks for your time.
Thank you, Tim. It's always a pleasure.